Hey, my name is Drew. Welcome to Overlake Student Ministries. We are creating a safe place where every student is loved, known, heard, supported, and challenged.
Loved, known, heard, supported, and challenged.
Hey, I'm Will, and here at SM, we make sure that every student is loved, known, heard, supported, and challenged.
Hey, what is going on, SM? So glad that you are tuning in. Middle schoolers, high schoolers, we love you. My name is Connor.
My name is James.
And this is the third group life of 2021. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
We're already on week 3. Listen, hey, we are in the middle of a series we are calling Vibes. And we're talking about how to not let our feelings be the boss of us. And so tonight, we are going to be talking about the feeling of fear. But fear not, because it's going to be an amazing message. So this is really going to be a good night.
Let's go. And what you do not have to fear is our MSM and HSM virtual winter retreat, because it is COVID safe, social distance, all sorts of good things to keep you safe and healthy. But what's also amazing is that this time is going to be for our souls. It's going to be good soul care with our friends. And so you are going to want to go on tonight. This is the last night to register. Go on occsm.org and register there. Put your name in. It is going to be a blast of a Saturday, February 6th, this Saturday. Going to be a good time.
Now, hey, because, this is student ministries and this is group life, we are going to have a little fun. Now, listen, we're talking about fear tonight. So we thought, what better thing to do than to go scare somebody? We got some costumes. We're gonna go scare somebody, and then afterwards, we're gonna have a time where you guys get to chat a little bit about your fears. But before we do that, it's time to go scare. Here we go.
We got her good. Hey, girl, will you come and say for the camera how you feel?
That was not nice. I did not like that.
Well, hey friends, we're in another week of this series called Vibes, and vibes are like emotions. And the thing about emotions is that we all experience them in our lives. And sometimes without realizing it, they can end up controlling us in a way that isn't healthy. And today, I want to talk about the one vibe that fights to control us, fights to control me. And that's fear. If there's one vibe that I am far too familiar with, it's fear. All of us have experienced fear in some form or another. It's kept us from trying new things, it's hurt our friendships, it's created a script in our head that convinces us of things about us or our lives that just aren't true. And the crazy thing about fear is that our ability to experience it is something that makes us human. Think about it. Our fear comes from the fact that we can gather information and think about the future. As humans, we can wonder, what if this happens or that happens? And it can make us afraid. We are where we are today because the human race has been able to gather knowledge, build on that knowledge, and then project it into the future. It's why we have continued to develop and change and evolve. The same ability that allows us to fear also allows us to imagine and have hope. And those are great things. So the ability to gather information and think about the future has two sides. It has the fear side and the hope side. And I think we would all agree that the hope side is really great. We love imagining and dreaming, but then we have the fear side, the side that comes up with all the what ifs. And we all know that the what ifs make us feel a bit crazy. They make our world shrink until our world is pretty much made up of whatever is making us afraid. So think about the last thing you were afraid of. How much of your day was spent thinking and stressing over it? Maybe it was your midterm. Did you say the wrong thing or feel dumb whenever you had to turn your Zoom camera on in class? Like if you're anything like me, it's most of your day. You're thinking about it, you're working through scenarios, you're planning out what to do or say. That's what happened when this fear vibe takes over. Our world gets really small and our world becomes our fear. But here's some good news. Jesus had a lot to say about fear. The problem is we tend to read the verses where he talks about fear by themselves, and then they don't really seem possible or practical. For example, Jesus said, "Fear not." In other words, when it comes to fear, just stop, just quit. It's not always exactly helpful, right? So today, I actually want to look at a passage where Jesus talks to some of his closest friends and disciples about fear. But I want to talk about it in a little more context. You see, Jesus had 12 main people who followed him around and learned from him. He was their teacher, and they were his disciples and his close friends. And at one point, he says this to them, "I'm going to send you out like sheep among wolves." Think about it. Wolves are predators and sheep are prey. So Jesus is like, you guys are the prey and I'm going to send you out to a bunch of predators. You know, the people you typically want to run away from. Go have fun. And then he gets more literal. He tells them that they will also be arrested and beaten, and to wrap it all up, he tells them not to be afraid. Don't fear. Sounds easy, right? So we tend to read the story and stop there. But when you look at it in its context, this is just a part of a bigger story. You see, Jesus took his friends on a field trip before this conversation, and it was all connected. They were in a boat in the middle of the sea, and while they were there, Matthew, one of Jesus' disciples, said that this happened. Suddenly, a furious storm came up the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. Jesus and his disciples are on this small boat in the middle of the water, and without warning, a storm shows up. So think about the noise from all the waves, the wind, the thunder, and they're all in a boat in the middle of it. Not exactly a leisurely cruise here. And what is Jesus doing in the middle of this crazy storm? He's taking a nap. So can you even imagine? The disciples are scared out of their minds, worried about their lives, and their fearless leader, Jesus, is sleeping right through it. So naturally, they go to wake him up and they say, "Lord, save us. We're gonna drown." Like they are freaking out. And the disciples are frustrated. They feel alone, and most of all, they feel scared. And they want their leader to calm them down, and he's sleeping. So how does he respond? Here's what Jesus says, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" So I can only imagine the disciples' response when he asked this. They had to stand there soaked from the rain, wobbling around the waves, and just point around them. But Jesus wasn't paying attention to what was in front of them. He was actually teaching them something. He was teaching them about fear. So he gets up and he doesn't panic, which is used to kind of make a point. And that's this: no matter how scary the circumstances, Jesus stays calm. So then Matthew says that Jesus spoke to the wind and the waves, and they calmed down. And the disciples were amazed, and they responded by saying this: "What kind of man is this that even the winds and the waves obey him?" Then they thought about what they just saw. This is unbelievable. Now they weren't just amazed, but they were afraid. Like, who is this man who can calm down a storm? He has so much power, but yet he used it to take care of them. And he was never afraid. In a moment, their confidence in Jesus overwhelmed their fear of the storm. And that's the point of this field trip. Jesus took them on to show them that their feelings of fear didn't have to control them or boss them around, to show them that there is someone bigger and more capable than whatever they are afraid of. So Jesus goes on. He says this, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside the Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows." So Jesus is saying, God's paying attention to you. Don't be afraid. You're worth more than the sparrows. Don't be afraid. God's numbered the hairs on your head. Do not be afraid. He is reminding us and says you are valuable to him. God is close and he knows your circumstances, and he is concerned with what is happening in your everyday life, your real life. He cares about the things we care about. So when it comes to dealing with fear, this is a big deal because God knows all about it and is with you in the middle of it. But Jesus isn't done teaching them about fear. They actually go on another field trip. You see, Jesus has been preaching all day. It's starting to get late. People are getting tired and hungry. You know the feeling? The disciples suggest that they send everyone home to eat, but Jesus seems to think that they can feed everyone, which sounds crazy because no one has enough food or money to make that happen. Like, this wasn't a small group of people. We're talking about thousands of people. So then the disciples get fearful again. How can they possibly feed everyone here? And then Jesus gets a little boy's lunch. He prays over it. And Matthew says that Jesus split the boy's lunch between the 12 disciples and told them to go feed the crowd. And you guys, it worked. Everyone got food, but before they have time to stay and enjoy it, Jesus actually tells them to get in another boat. And they're probably thinking, whoa, Jesus, way too soon. Like, do you remember what happened last time we got in the boat? But they get in anyways because they obey Jesus. Except here's the plot twist. This time, Jesus doesn't get in the boat with them. He tells them that he'll meet them on the other side of the sea. So the disciples spend the night rowing, and at some point in the night, the waves get bigger and the wind blows, and they have to be thinking, oh my gosh, we're about to get in another storm. Like, they probably have PTSD from the one before. They look out on the water and can't believe what they see. You guys, Jesus is walking on water, and Matthew records that they were terrified. In fact, they thought Jesus was a ghost. But then Jesus says something that gets their attention because they hadn't heard it before. He says this, he says, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." So this is Jesus trying to remind them all the lessons and field trips that they had taken up to this point. They saw miracles, they heard teachings, and yet fear was still controlling them. In fact, fear even controlled them after this trip. They remained fearful to the very end of Jesus' life. When we fast forward to the night of Jesus' arrest, we see that the disciples actually abandoned Jesus because they were afraid that if they stayed too close, that the same thing might happen to them. And Jesus was crucified, they left because they were afraid. The next day when Jesus was buried, they were hiding in a room because they were afraid. They weren't there with him. But then Sunday came around, and the woman who had followed Jesus went to the tomb and discovered that it was empty. They came back and told the disciples. So the disciples went to the tomb and saw that it was empty and thought that someone had actually stolen his body. But then Jesus himself appears to them, and they realize that he's alive. And here's the deal. When the guy you've been following dies and then comes back to life, suddenly everything he has said to you before seems more true, more real, and more believable. Suddenly, all the times he told them not to be afraid made sense. He could conquer death itself, so he can handle whatever they were afraid of. You see, for the disciples who loved and followed Jesus, the resurrection wasn't just this nice surprise. It was everything. It made them bold, it gave them strength, it put everything Jesus said about fear in perspective. Their world was still crazy, but because of the resurrection, the disciples said anyone who followed Jesus could put their fear in its place. It was like they finally understood the lessons from the boat. When all things around them seemed so much bigger and scarier than they could handle, now Jesus' words made sense. Fear not, I'm with you. It took on a whole new meaning. Okay, the thing is, we all know that fear will always be a part of our experience, but we don't have to live like fear is in charge of us and telling us what to do. You guys remember Peter, who was one of Jesus' closest friends, and he was there with Jesus during the miracles and the boat rides, and then he made promises to Jesus that he didn't keep. Like, he said he'd never deny knowing Jesus, and then he did. He said he'd always be there for Jesus, and then he left after Jesus died. But you guys, after the resurrection, everything changed. Fear no longer controlled Peter. So he gave some tips about fear in a letter that he writes to Christians who actually never had the chance to meet Jesus. And here's what Peter shares. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. When Peter says cast, he means throw or hurl or heave. You guys, these are actions and intentional words. It means that this doesn't just happen by accident, but it means to be active with your fear. When you feel anxiety, fear, or worry, take it all and throw it to Jesus. This is the most important part. You see, Peter experienced this firsthand in the 3 years that he spent with Jesus. When we throw our fears on him, it's because he cares for us. So remember it this way. Here's what I want you to remember tonight is because of Jesus, fear doesn't have to be the boss of you. So here's what I want you to do. When fear becomes the vibe that takes over your life and starts to control how you act, I want you to do this. Name whatever it is you're afraid of. Then write it down and throw that fear to Jesus. Take those words to him in prayer. And talk to your small group leader about your fear. They are the best resource for you. So you guys, as we wrap up tonight, I hope you'll remember that these vibes, feelings, and emotions that we have don't have to control us, especially fear. While they are never meant to make us who we are, they are invitations to pay attention. So while we can learn from our emotions, we need to know that because of Jesus, they don't have to be the boss of us. So as we head to small group tonight, let's be bold and courageous enough to share the fears that we face with one another. Together, we can help each other. Fear not. We love you guys. Have a great night in small group.